Okay, good. Welcome to Menopause, Pain and Gut Health webinar. Thank you very much for joining me. And my name is Brenda Rogers and I specialise in midlife and menopausal wellness. And I am in my home clinic right here. I love working from home, especially because you can do these webinars late into the evening without missing dinner. I love my kitchen. I am a big foodie, love to eat and love to cook. I have learned traditional cooking practices, and more I'm getting into fermented foods and strange cuts of meat and organ meats and raw milk and all kinds of things. So just fascinated by that. My favourite food is probably butter, anything with butter. Love butter. I have a fiance and a stepdaughter, and I live in Sydney. So just a little bit of information about me. So imagine you're here because you're intrigued by the title, which is pain, largely, and particularly pain at 45, 50, 55, even 60. And there is a correlation between pain and inflammation. And inflammation, the source of inflammation, primarily 90% of inflammation comes from the gut, which is why we're talking about gut gluten and GAPS. So I'm sorry to hear that you might be experiencing pain. It's an awful thing. And it's a really loud message for us to pay attention. And sometimes we're trying but don't know what to do. And other times we're just ignoring it. So maybe you fall into one of those two categories. And you're welcome to pop in the chat which one it is. So I kind of direct my information towards you because there's enormous amount of information on this topic, and we've got sort of 45 minutes and it's not long. So as you're doing that, let me give you a little bit of basics, because my experience is that most women don't really know exactly what menopause is. And you guys might be practitioners, you might be massage therapists, aromatherapists, or you might just have a general interest in well-being. I'd love to know any of those. Another thing to post in the chat if you wouldn't mind. And I can't assume that you know exactly what menopause is. So I'm just going to give you the technical, definitions and make sure that you're clear on that. So the first thing is perimenopause. Perimenopause is that 2, 3, 5 or 10 years leading up to the end of the period. Janine, naturopath, wonderful. Leading up to the cessation of the period. I like to think of it as puberty in reverse. And if you think about puberty, how long that is, it's kind of starting at 11, 12, maybe even younger these days. And when does it end exactly? Maybe 21, maybe a bit before that. We kind of really don't know, because we're stepping into this new phase. And it is a life transition. Menopause or perimenopause is a life transition. It also includes that year after the last period before we are technically in menopause, which is 1 year after the last menstrual cycle, or last period. Non-surgical menopause can start in your late 30s and even earlier with some women. The duration of menopause is similar to puberty, and what you start to notice in around, I think around 43 is a good age to start to notice your fertility drops off. Some women then can start to feel this sort of stirrings of change within them. And you might get hot flushes, but usually don't notice anything really much and especially if you're healthy, up until the late 40s, where that's where things start to change. It's sort of a closer phase of perimenopause, and you might have missed periods or heavy periods if your progesterone is low, or mood swings or PMS, or these kinds of things, really indicating the hormonal imbalance. Hot flushes, of course, is one of the big ones, as the hormones fluctuate quite a lot. So then we have menopause. Menopause is actually one day in our lives. Menopause is the 12 months after the last period, as I mentioned. It's not really helpful, except most of us, when we're talking about menopause, are actually talking about perimenopause and then postmenopause. So we're just creating the distinction there. So by this stage, the estrogen's dropped, the progesterone's bottomed out, new hormones come up to replace them. So we're not left in the dark. There is a new phase opening up, and that you don't learn a lot about that from your doctors or from the current menopause narrative out there. They don't really talk to you about the beautiful next phase that's opening up. The wisdom phase. It's a wilder phase. There's other hormones driving it, and it's actually quite liberating to not have to worry about your period anymore. And but that whole process can be a little getting used to as well, because we are getting older and wrinkly and, that kind of thing. So there's a bit to deal with there psychologically as well. The main thing in terms of pain is that estrogen is a steroidal hormone, as you guys would know, made from cholesterol, and it is like steroidal hormones. It's anti-inflammatory. It's naturally anti-inflammatory. And so as it withdraws, the inflammation that's already present due to lifestyle and other things, that can look worse or feel worse because that natural buffering agent, estrogen, is no longer present. So the issue isn't that the estrogen's gone away. That's normal for women at that age. What's not normal is whatever's producing the inflammation in the first place, and that's what we want to focus our attention on here. Menopause does not require treatment. It's not a disease. It's a stage of life. It's a rite of passage, and it's an extraordinary time for a woman's life, and there's so much more information to come out on that to really help support the empowerment of women, which is a big thing for me. I just love educating women about menopause so they don't feel like their lives are ending, because it certainly isn't. Very frequently, because we do live in an unhealthy lifestyle, we do live in a culture that is patriarchal, and there's a little bit of misogyny, let's face it. And there's also ageism, which we have to grapple with as we go through this stage of life, because for a lot of women, they feel more invisible and more redundant in this next stage of life, and that's a psychological change. So there's stress, and there's lots of things associated with this time of life: more responsibility, teenage kids, aging parents. For a lot of women, a lot of couples, it's the common time to separate. So there's a lot going on, and it's not surprising that the stress can be a little overwhelming. Maybe people aren't taking well enough of themselves, maybe drinking a little too much, eating too much of the wrong things, and it's not surprising that symptoms are a result of that. But you guys are all naturopaths, so you'll be fine, right? Yes, Deanna? All right, so natural menopause, spontaneous ending of menstruation not caused by disease or surgery, chemotherapy, or radiation therapy. And then you've got surgical menopause, which takes place after both ovaries have been removed, causing immediate menopause to occur, or surgery to remove the uterus only, which does not cause menopause if the ovaries remain in place, although the period does stop because there's no blood being built up there's no uterus. And then you've got premature menopause, which is basically the cessation of the period prior to 40. And there's stories now of women in their late teens, in their 20s, going into menopause. My perspective on that is that it's very much due to poor health and, maybe worsened by genetics, but largely just the cultural decline in general health, leading to an imbalance in the hormonal system. And you could talk about estrogens, xenoestrogens, and nutrient deficiencies and all those kinds of things contributing to that. It's very tragic, though, because a lot of those people don't realise that natural medicine's around and herbs are around, and that they could do something with normalising and balancing their body, possibly to restore endocrine function and hormone function. Also, premature menopause can occur due to medical intervention. Now let's look at the common symptoms, and I'd love to hear in the chat if you relate to any of these. 42, yes, love to know your ages, ladies. 42, ovaries removed, yeah. Learning to navigate it. We're all learning to navigate it, regardless if you've got your ovaries or your uterus or not. And even if you're healthy, because remember, it's a spiritual, psychological, intellectual, and physical transition. So you can be physically healthy, but still have one hell of an emotional ride as you go through the 45 to 55 year period. And then the 55 to 65 age range is the most productive and powerful time. There's quite a lot of research now showing that this is the time women take on leadership roles. They get fired up about charities and businesses and making a difference. And if you're healthy and well, this time can be an extraordinarily productive and rewarding time. You can find your purpose. You can live your purpose. You can, some women leave their husbands and go and do what they've always wanted to do, eat, pray, love around India or something. Some go back to study. Some go and start a relationship with a woman instead of a man. Anything's possible. And it's a beautiful time. It can be a beautiful time. For some women, it's a terrible time. The suicide rate is quite high for the 45 to 55 age range. And, it's us practitioners educating women about what's normal at this time that can really make the difference to those women, because it's very disconcerting. Some of the changes take the rug out from under you big time. So common symptoms. Now, not all of these symptoms are common at this age range, 45 to 55, say. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're all due to low estrogen or low progesterone. A lot of symptoms are the fault of adrenal overload or adrenal exhaustion, burnout, others thyroid related, and so on. So hot flushes are tricky little things. They could be related to estrogen, but often they're not. Often this nervous system can be involved, the liver not processing hormones out of the body properly. And most people have liver issues. If we think about a fairly high proportion of people have insulin resistance and fatty liver, and then going through menopause where there's xenoestrogens and poor conjugation of hormones and gut issues and all that kind of combination. And it could be that just a good liver clean out or a gut and liver clean out. I've actually helped some women clear up hot flushes just by making sure they drink enough water, because of course it's fluid in the body, it regulates our temperature. So if you're dehydrated, the body will struggle to will struggle. So on that note, I'm going to have a sip of water. I recommend you ladies have a sip of water as well. And please, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat and I will endeavour to answer them as well. Joint and muscle pain is really the one that we're focusing in tonight. I have a lot of women at this age, their second or third autoimmune condition, fibromyalgia, which is very, very awful. All those myalgias, all those myo, muscle and arthritic type rheumatoid arthritis, all these things are worsened for women at midlife. And rather than going on HRT, which is always an option, rather than going on HRT, there is the alternative of finding out what's causing the inflammation in the first place and doing something about it, because that's going to slow your aging process, that's going to keep you healthy for longer, that's going to keep your brain healthy. That just is, it makes sense that to listen to what the body's telling you. It's not happy about something, and rather than masking it with a drug, to actually address the root cause, which is what us naturopaths and natural health practitioners and nutritionists and that kind of thing, that's what we do. We think a little bit deeper, we go a little bit more holistic. Insomnia can worsen muscle pain because it can create more stress in the body, more inflammation. There's mood changes, vaginal dryness. These are some of the common symptoms. The other thing that's very, very common is weight gain. And what is commonly associated with that is insulin resistance. And the high carbohydrate diet and the high processed food diet that is the standard Australian diet is an automatic insulin resistance creator. You can't avoid it really. So a lot of women, if you're here thinking about your clients and what they're dealing with, and they've got weight around the middle, or they've put on 10 kilos since they stopped menstruating, or all those things, then you can pretty safely assume insulin is an issue. And insulin resistance increases risk of cardiovascular disease, big time, along with cancer and mood issues. So you can start to see there's kind of a connection between all these things. And underlying all of that is lifestyle, diet, and in particular gut health. So you may have heard people talk about going gluten-free, and for a lot of people, going gluten-free automatically reduces inflammation, particularly if there's Hashimoto's thyroiditis or brain memory kind of things or skin things. Going gluten-free helps, but the problem is that going gluten-free is not enough, because we're not healing the gut. Yeah, they instantly, sorry, I just read that. If you're a naturopath, you'll understand this concept, and maybe if you're in alternative medicine, you're familiar with it. But let me just explain one concept that's a big part of the philosophy of natural medicine. And this is the concept of the terrain. The body is the terrain, and it's the terrain that creates the context for wellness. So it's a bit, I like to use when I'm speaking to my clients, when I'm explaining this, with live blood analysis, because live blood analysis is an evaluation of the terrain. The analogy that I like to use is like a farmer. So a farmer has his soil, and if his soil is toxic and had pesticides on it and all the good bacteria has died, and all the nutrients have been leached out, so it's just clay and the pH is wrong, and there's no water, it's all dried out, then nothing's going to grow, or weeds are just going to grow, or things aren't going to grow well. It's the same with our bodies. if we have poor pH, nutrient deficiencies, the wrong bacteria growing, then our terrain is going to be an environment where weeds, i.e. disease, can flourish. And so it's never, people think, oh, it's the gluten that's the problem, it's the wheat that's the problem, it's the dairy that's the problem, I can't have eggs, I can't have a gazillion things, and it's increasing more and more. But it's not the food that's the problem, it's the gut, it's the terrain. And that we have a lot of control over. And that if we restore gut health, then we can bring those foods back in, maybe not as frequently because they are damaging, but once the gut is really strong again, you can have those foods and be okay. So that's an important distinction to remember, that, and it makes healing simple because it's a gut healing protocol for all of it. So lifestyle recommendations for menopause, for midlife, and for all of the conditions and diseases and symptoms associated with midlife and menopause. Here are some general recommendations. The number one thing is to get informed. So well done for being here, ladies. I'm very pleased to see you here. And for those watching the recording, thank you for being here as well. I am available to do talks. So if you have a group, a good amount of people, or a Facebook group where you'd like me to speak, then I'm happy to do that. Because being informed is, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to menopause. We do need to learn to manage stress. Now, if you've got the constitutional type, and you can see this in your iris, if you have this sort of anxious, anxiety, muscular, cramping kind of constitution, then anxiety will be a part of your life, and anxiety will come up whenever you feel out of control or overwhelmed, and big time you'll feel that at menopause. So we need to up-level our ability to deal with stress and actively do things. And I'm a big fan of yoga, especially yin yoga. It's there. I add that into the programs that I do with the ladies that I'm working with, and the group program that I'm working with, because it just has so many enormous benefits. The personal development work and the healing work, the inner work, healing our childhoods, healing our broken relationships, healing our relationship to ourselves, all of that is essential, and even more so at midlife, because we're moving into that wisdom phase. And menopause is, as Christiane Northrup says in her book Menopause, The Wisdom of Menopause, she says it's a mother of all wake-up calls, and stuff that's been swept under the carpet up until your 50th birthday, it comes back to haunt you, and it's a good time to go and really handle it. And that's where you guys come in. You go and see a great massage therapy, therapist, Reiki practitioner, spiritual healer, work with a naturopath who can refer you to these kinds of people and have your collaborative team. It's an amazing thing for a woman to have, essential thing for a woman to have. Consider the chemicals in your life, particularly your feminine hygiene products. If you use them, tampons and pads have chemicals in them that they alone can cause heavy bleeding, period pain being another type of pain associated with the menstrual cycle, of course. But not just that. I've recently started buying my meat online from an ethical farmer. I've just started valuing the investment in chemical-free as much as possible, pasture-raised, grass-fed, all of those things. Artisanal dairy products like high-quality milk, raw milk cheese. These are part of the quality strategy that I often recommend to people. And as you become interested in nutrition and well informed about nutrition, you do become a little bit of a food snob. And I confess I'm one. and the additional flavor of organic food, or homemade sourdoughs and homemade yogurts, and someone else has made good quality, I don't know, pate or something like that. These things become important. On the nourishment side, the diet side, very, very, very important. And not just a whole food diet, and not just a nutrient-dense diet, but learning how to prepare these foods properly so that the nutrients are available. And that can mean a few different things. That can mean activating your nuts and seeds and grains and legumes. It can mean fermenting your flours, fermenting your legumes. It can mean fermenting your dairy so you can tolerate dairy. And it can mean ensuring that there are foods in the diet that support gut health. And a lot of that has to do with meat stocks as opposed to bone broths. Meat stocks are, think of chicken noodle soup, where if you make chicken noodle soup, the water hasn't been boiling, or the meat hasn't been in the water for 24 hours, it's just 30 minutes or an hour or so. That produces meat stock. And ideally, a piece of meat that has a joint or collagen and all that kind of stuff in it, that produces a very nourishing, gut healing meat stock, which is an important part of the GAPS diet. It's the first stage of the GAPS diet, and just loves up the guts, basically. Obviously, there's avoiding stimulants and anything that damages the gut wall. So that is grains initially, keeping those to a minimum, and having maybe herbal teas instead of coffee, especially if you're healing the gut. If you've got pain, then the gut needs to be healed in most cases. And so these things need to come out of the diet temporarily. They can be reintroduced once the gut's, as I mentioned, once the gut's healed, maybe with, judicious integration into your nourishing diet. But nothing is forever. Nothing is for forever. We all love a coffee. We all love a tea. We all love a chocolate. We all love, maybe my thing is bacon. I love bacon. A cake or two, that kind of thing. So everything's possible. Support the thyroid. The thyroid seems to get a raw deal at anything hormonal, at pregnancy and birth as well, the hormone. And lots of women iodine deficient. So gently supporting the thyroid with the right kind of iodine, and the other minerals, zinc, selenium as well, and ensuring that the liver works well and the adrenals are supported, and you will have good thyroid function, hopefully. Support the liver, as I've said there. Supporting the liver is largely getting the gut right, because the toxins that the liver has to deal with come from the gut in the first place. And so the two go together. But then making sure you're eating cruciferous vegetables, for example, sulfur-rich vegetables, cooked ideally. Making sure you're having, herbs and spices in your foods, and making pastes from green herbs and using those. So there's all these beautiful medicinal ways of eating and adding to your diet so that the gut health is improved. If there is a weight issue at midlife, then you need to know that in order to maintain weight after menopause, you have to eat less. If you eat the same as you did prior to menopause, and I'm talking specifically about the cessation of the period, if you eat the same, you'll put on weight, maybe only a little bit, and maybe 3 to 5 kilos is okay. A lot of women put a little bit of weight on and it's just this beautiful extra layer. Our fat produces estrogen and produces hormones, so there's a little bit of a buffer there as far as hormonal support in the body. But if women are very concerned, that it's been 5 years or 10 years since menopause and they've put on 10 kilos, that's because they didn't decrease their overall intake of food. And usually that's because we're not connected to our bodies. We're not listening to our bodies. So one of the programs that I'm now offering, which I just find absolutely incredibly exciting and rewarding, is teaching women to reconnect with their bodies. And when you start to do that, you start to listen to your appetite. Am I hungry now? Do I need breakfast? Do I want just a light soup, or do I need, and that's a beautiful way to a beautiful goal with growing older is to be less interested on the outside of our bodies and the because of, let's face it, we're getting wrinklier, we're getting stretch marks of still never going to go away. The things get a little looser. Nothing's going to happen, and that's not going to change, right? We're never going to be 21 again. So taking your focus inward and starting to connect to your senses and connect to your intuition, I highly encourage that. Keep the immune system healthy, of course. Gut health, I've kind of talked a little bit about already. Happy to have more questions specifically to your conditions if you want to pop them in the chat. Number one thing to avoid is processed carbohydrates. Number two thing to avoid is processed fats. That's all your industrialized seed oils. And the number three thing to avoid is processed protein. So basically, I'm not a big fan of collagen supplements and protein isolates like pea protein and whey protein, and all these things are marketing fads that unbalance the amino acid balance in the body, disrupt the amino acid balance in the body. And because we've been indoctrinated into low fat for the last 60 years, people have forgotten that our grandmothers and great grandmothers would eat the lard and the tallow and the rendered. They'd have a pot of dripping on the bench, and they'd fry their meat in this dripping, beautiful, rich, lovely fats in those animal fats. Or they'd have, like one of the things I love to do is casseroles and stews in the slow cooker with the cheap cuts of the meat, which often got a fat in them and connective tissue. And if you cook them long enough, all that starts to dissolve, and then you get beautiful, rich collagen and gelatin and all those other fabulous amino acids that give us a balanced amino acid profile in the body. And that's important for gut healing and lung healing and brain healing and all those kinds of things. What to avoid, I've already mentioned. I'm a big fan of essential oils, but we aren't going to go into that today. Baths, you might use baths could be foot baths or sitz baths or whole baths. Saunas, I've just been learning about infrared saunas for helping to aid detoxification. And then there's lots of other things going along as well. Adrenal health, because you do want healthy adrenals if you have pain. So you want, there's a connection between adrenal health and gut health, and of course gut health and the pain. So the adrenals are hungry for cholesterol. It just loves and loves and loves cholesterol. It loves sodium, which we find in the whole salts, like Celtic sea salt is my favorite, and sleep. These are the three critical things for healthy adrenals. And all three of them, women in their 50s can be deficient in for various reasons. One, cholesterol because we've been indoctrinated to avoid it, which is wrong. Salt because we think we should avoid that too because it's associated with blood pressure. Processed salt may be, but whole salt isn't. And then sleep, because you're going through menopause, sleep can be tricky, can be really tricky, but not impossible to deal with. I think I'm only going to do a couple more things, not really going to go over the brain, not really going to go over the pancreas. So I'm going to just leave it there. If I've been a little bit general and you have a question, then please go ahead and pop a question in the chat. What I'd like to do now is to discuss with you. I'd like to introduce myself because I haven't done that properly as far as a practitioner goes. And I'd like to share with you, for those of you watching, not so much for your clients, but for yourself, and you resonate with some of the things that I'm saying, you know, it's a lot of information. And my question to you is around, you know, how are you going to implement all of that? And sometimes it's worth doing that, kickstarting that with somebody who knows what they're doing. And so I'd like to just share with you what I'm offering, which may be a resource for you. It may be a resource for your clients if there's not a conflict of interest between you and I. And it's just a wonderful way to ensure that you get back to center, because honestly, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And we are often reticent to get help when we need it the most. We're often reticent to invest in ourselves. And honestly, we just got to do something about that. We just have to do something about that. All right, so let me share my screen again with you. And I haven't got it in full presentation mode, but you kind of get the picture here. Let me get rid of this so you can see it. So who am I? I'm a naturopath, been a naturopath for 30 years. Nutrition is my thing. So I've just finished the GAPS practitioner training, which is just incredibly fabulous. As I mentioned earlier, I love being in the kitchen, and I practice all of this myself. I've spent years in the kitchen mastering my knowledge on that kind of thing. And as diet is a number one pillar for well-being, and there's a lot of misinformation around, a lot of information that's incorrect, especially with our medical profession, and in some cases with our complementary medicine practitioners, maybe poorly informed nutrition programs that people do. There's just a lot of incorrect information out there that we really need to clean up, really. Of course, naturopathy includes herbalism. I'm a clinical aromatherapist, which included energy healing as well when I did my clinical aromatherapy. Life coach for almost 20 years. I do a lot of coaching in my practice because we're dealing with change management. When you're looking at helping someone change their diet and their lifestyle, there's resistance. They need guidance. They need a coaching process. Yoga teacher, Art of Feminine Present teacher, wisdom keeper, and activist. I help women become empowered through their journey back to whole health. And the way that I do that is assess them properly. So I use iridology, I use live blood, I do urine analysis and various other in-clinic tests to not only give me the additional knowledge, but for them to see for themselves up on the screen or in the test result that something's not right. I'm a Weston Price Foundation chapter leader, recently completed but not quite finished, GAPS practitioner, and a few other things there. So I'd like to just share with you my 9-week menopause masterclass. And if you'd like to take some notes, this might be something that interests you, particularly if you're looking to go from, or you know somebody looking to go from, you know, the miseries, unattractive, you know, relationship not really working that well, feeling really stuck and not sure about this transition, which is what we call in the liminal phase between the ending of one phase and the beginning of the new phase. There's this in-between phase, which is quite disconcerting. If you're feeling heavy or moody or in pain, of course, and you'd like to be in flow again and doing what you need to do, and often what you know you should be doing for your well-being, and to really traverse through menopause with empowerment. So the program is 9 weeks, and each week we have a different topic. I'll just briefly go through them. A history of menopause, because similarly with birthing, we need to get the context that we're in. You know, how come women are disempowered at menopause? How come they become invisible? How come aging is the way it is, perceived the way it is? How come there are no wise women archetypes in our spiritual texts and those kind of things? That is really, you know, where did Premarin start? Where did the menopause name start? So that's really great fun. The modern context for menopause and a new narrative. There is a medical context for menopause, which most women do not like and do not resonate with. So we want to create a new narrative. All the details about what is menopause, what to expect, the changes, you know, should I do medication, should I do HRT, all that kind of stuff. And then week 4 is preparing for a pain-free menopause, so looking at what causes inflammation and accelerates aging. The next one is preparing for a calm menopause, and that's to deal with what we need to do for good moods, good energy, and then that deeper level of finding yourself, because it's a great time to do that work. Preparing for a light menopause, and that's maybe light in the sense of weight gain, light in the sense of brain working, and light in the sense of being able to sleep. And there's lots of other things that will come into it, but they're the key ones. And then week 7 is the mystery of menopause. So this bringing in some of the women's mysteries, the moon cycle, some ancient wisdom around general archetypes of women post-menopause. Really, really juicy, fabulous stuff. A woman's role in post-menopause, and I've got some research and some videos around that. And then just at the end, a wrapping up, a summary, Q&A, resources. In fact, the whole thing includes Q&A. So that looks pretty cool, doesn't it? And so the details of that, a major confidence boost in just 9 weeks. I think that does occur for a lot of women just through understanding. It's 9-week program, 1 session a week for 45 minutes at lunchtime. Starts on Thursday, July 14, which is in fact what's called a buck moon. And I looked that up, and it says the spiritual meaning of this moon is about pursuing our own personal development and releasing anything that might have been standing in our way. Think of it as a new beginning moon. And I thought that was just a beautiful day to start our program on. What you'll get out of it is you will become more informed, more confident, more calm, more inspired, and healthier. Bonus, right? Normal price, $197. Bargain. However, for ATMS, Natural Medicine Week, I've got a very, very special price for the next 24 hours only. If you're watching this, for 24 hours only, and that is $97. And for some of you, it's a tax deduction. So super, super good. If you're in wellness, it's a tax deduction. Empowered Women empower women. If you are interested in that, just need to email me and I will sort the payment out for you. And then you've got a few weeks before we start in July. It's via Zoom. It'll be a Thursday lunchtime, and it will be recorded, and it'll be a beautiful 9 weeks. So all you have to do is email me within the next 24 hours on that brenda@brendarogers.com.au and say, I'm in, I want to be informed and empowered and do the masterclass, and we'll sort that out for you. If you would like to find some free resources, book a 30-minute discovery session, watch some YouTube videos, listen to some podcasts, all those kinds of things, you can scan that QR code there with your phone, and that will take you to my Linktree profile, which has, hopefully, it'll take you there, and it'll have all my my links. Facebook, I've got a Facebook group called Women of Wisdom you might want to join. And yeah, I'm really about educating and empowering, and you kind of need to hang around me for a while to get that. Got lots of free stuff on YouTube from previous webinars. From the webinar that I did 12 months ago for HMS, we had 150 people that time. So I'd like to say thank you. And I would then I'm just going to leave that up for another 30 seconds in case you'd like to get your phone out and scan it. And then what I'm going to do in our last few minutes together is I'm going to stop recording and answer a few questions that might be a little bit more private. So thank you for watching, everyone. Thank you for watching the recording if you're in recording land, and I look forward to connecting with you in the future.